What makes your heart tick? What spiritual path are you on? What do you believe? Let's dive deep into all things mystical, into the heart of the matter. You're listening to Deep Water with Cheryl, Earth Alchemy. You're listening to Deep Water with Cheryl, Earth Alchemy, and today we are here with legendary and some would call the last Druid, Michael Tsarion. Michael, how the hell have you been over the past 5 years?
That's a great question. Well, it's nice to be here with you. Thanks so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And I love the work that you're doing with your new channel as well. That's exciting.
It really is. Thank you. Now, for those who don't know, who've been living under a rock, where did you start your journey? How long have you been doing this? How old were you? And what is your field, and what do you think is your specialty in this research? All of this.
Well, that started long ago, back in Ireland, actually.
Mhm.
Very, very young, in the time of the Troubles, really, around about the
Mhm.
late 70s, I suppose, when I got exposed to different subjects, Celtic mythology, subversive symbolism in the media, a variety of different subjects.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that this was connected to any conspiratorial movement or anything like that. That would come later.
Mhm.
Uh, but then I visited America several times, and then on the third trip, which was about 1989, in which I was going to stay for a long, long time, um, a friend of mine brought in. I was at work, just ordinary, work in retail in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
California, a land of
Mm.
fruit and nuts. And
I
believe
couldn't
you
do it.
me, they were fruit and nuts. I was surrounded by total and utter, basically scum, rotten fucking people, right? And
Right.
but there was one guy that I kind of hooked up with, and he had a small library. He was kind of lost, but he had a kind of a library of these very interesting books on all sorts of esoteric subjects. And something he did, I had never talked to him before, so why would he bring in these books and start running them by me, and befriending me and saying, so what do you think of this one? And what do you think of that one? And I had by that time, fairly amount of book knowledge or whatever you want to call it. So I'd give him my 2 cents. And so this is how it kind of started, where, yes, I'd done research a lot in Ireland, but we didn't have the access to bookstores. We lived in a very Christian fundamentalist Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
with deep restrictions, Cheryl, on what books even bookstores would carry. Their New Age so-called book,
Mm.
uh, they didn't have any New Age bookstores, and the section on any kind of spiritualism or New Ageism was about this big.
Oh,
And
98. I was young in 98, but yeah, it was just all about like grunge music and like flannels.
yeah, this was about exactly the time you're talking about, 89 into 90. And so
Hmm.
in Ireland, they still hadn't progressed. But now I come to America where you have gigantic bookstores in California.
Hmm.
And so me and him then would, surf these bookstores and purchase books in those days, huge amounts of books and read them and all of this. So a real journey of discovery started. What was in Ireland was perfect. It was great for what it was, limited, very, very limited. But I just built on that type of foundation, which I think
Hmm.
was quite strong, even though just incredibly limited. I was so blinkered about certain things.
Were
But
you
getting
doing
back,
music at that time as well?
what's that?
Were you doing music at that time as well?
Yes. In the 80s, we had a band. I have brothers and cousins, so we had a band. And one of the reasons why we were coming to America, right, was because of this band, because of music, as a matter of fact.
Oh
And
yeah.
the trip in 89 was really to prioritize the band. We were getting well known in Ireland, and my brother was a very good guitarist, so there was a lot of attention. And we thought, right, well, the next step, we've already been to America. I had a green card already since 1980.
Yeah.
So, yeah, luckily had that. And so we're thinking, right, that's the next step. Um, and
What was the
so
band?
Go ahead.
What was the band's name? Sorry, I get
Oh,
excited.
we just named it Tsarion actually at the time. We didn't really think of anything because we thought we might develop that name when other members joined and they had something better.
Okay.
But
All right.
until that time, until we were just three in the same family, then of course it was just Tsarion at that point as a placeholder. Yeah, and it went on like that. But sadly, when we got there in '89, we did it in a very strange way. We didn't all go out together. Each person went out at a different time. My brother, who's the main person in the band, he went first, and then the rest of us were kind of lagging behind in this weird. It was all orchestrated by older family members. So the thing was
Yeah.
kind of a badly arranged journey. There was a lot of negative stuff going on, and a lot
Still
of
a journey.
control. What's that?
Still a journey.
Sure, it was a time of a lot of trouble, in terms of a rite of passage, and we were kind of confused. And so, in this situation, it should have been real smooth. It started to become very, very difficult, and actually worse. He started getting into drugs and drink. He'd already been into that in Ireland in the scene in Belfast. But I thought, well, that's just a temporary thing of a teenager. What the hell? When we get over, and this amazing talent that he's got and all, so when we get over to the States, all of that will be cleared up, right?
No,
No.
not there. Oh, that's like a cesspool where you went.
There you go. So exactly. And he dived right into that cesspool, started hanging around with some very, very drug dealing type of weirdo California fucking freaks, And
Right.
I've never done anything like that in my life. And then the other brother, he also was of the similar mindset. And so, to cut a long story short, the band didn't actually work, and it broke up when we're in California of all places. So I find myself sort of like a fish out of water, and being ostracized because I'm the normal one, and I want to keep doing the spiritual thing, and all that. So it was an unworkable situation. He just got worse and worse and worse. And he's never changed. And so
Yeah.
it came to the point where, we had to part company, and I had to find my own way in America. So I was like reduced to the level of a Mexican laborer, and doing really, really humdrum jobs in the Bay Area, getting up at 4 a.m, taking the bus. And I didn't realize, you see, that American people told me that, oh, well, Ronald Reagan had released all the mad people from the asylums in the 80s. And so they just ride the buses up and down, the streets there. And
Still
so
doing it.
he's still doing it. So then, and sleeping in the bus shelters, all this stuff that we didn't see earlier when America was just wonderful, right? But
Right.
when we came back, oh my God, right? This already was a toilet, the Bay Area. And so I'm getting up at 4 a.m because they give me the keys to open the store where I worked
The
in Palo
bookstore.
Alto. And they, I would get up really early, but then I had to ride the bus with these psychotic people. It was awful, right? And so I worked like that, and I just found my own feet. And then, I'm telling you this because there's a musical tie-in, and that is that when all of this kerfuffle happened, I then started picking up, because I played bass, you see, in this band of ours.
That's what
Not,
was gonna my question was gonna be. So
yeah, I played guitar a little bit, but nothing compared to what, my brother was like. Oh, I mean, no way, right? This
right.
was an amazing talent. It was already mastering Steve Vai and Eddie Van Halen and everything you could imagine. Yngwie Malmsteen, he was doing all of that stuff, right? So I played bass, but when all of that collapsed, I started playing the acoustic guitar because there was an old acoustic Gibson that had been left. It was a beaten up thing, and had been left in the house when everything, went pear shaped. So this old beaten up guitar was like a B125, I think. I'm not sure, but it was something that I started to slowly learn how to play. So that's where this story matters, because this was my first introduction to the acoustic a guitar, And I didn't know where that was going to lead, but I loved it, and I just taught myself basically then to be my own guitarist, so to speak, you know. So yeah, that's where that journey began. So even though there's all this tumult and difficulty, the silver lining in the middle of all of that was this guitar that, you know, a big empty house, right? And of all things left over was this little acoustic guitar with a giant crack in the side, and that was my comfort. Yeah, that was my comfort. That was I was lost in America. I mean, like the Alice Cooper song, right? Lost in America. That's written about me, that song. So, but this guitar then, and then, you know, they have great guitar stores in America. I would frequent those and lick the window, and, you know,
Hey, some window shopping here.
yeah, of
Um,
course. Yeah.
so like in your field of research and your music, did your music help you in any aspect of your specialty?
Yes, it did. The two comforts for me at the time were learning guitar,
Hmm.
um, going to these they're called luthiers. You know, people will know that it's a guitar maker companies, of which you do have very, very, very good ones in the Bay Area, California. In fact, people maybe don't realize that the Bay Area and California in general is a real hub of guitar makers, some of the greatest in the world.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I've been around musicians all my life. My dad's a drummer, and my dad's a blind drummer, and so I'm big into music. Without music, I probably would not be here today, to be honest. I love to dance, I love to lip sync, and it takes me somewhere else. You know what I mean? It does shadow work. You know, it brings out all aspects of the human emotion. So I just love it. You know.
He's blind. He was blinded.
Father's blind, and he's a drummer. He's a little bit crazy, but yeah, he's definitely a blind drummer.
That's amazing. I have a lot of
Yeah,
respect for that. Yeah, I have a
yeah.
lot of respect for that.
What makes your heart beat, Michael?
Well, music. See, because remember, as I'm saying, why I'm telling you all this is because I wasn't meant to be doing anything that I'm doing now. Those were hobbies, Cheryl. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I say this to people, they don't even get it. We were into music through the whole of the 80s. Music was my blood. And it wasn't my doing that, you know, collapsed that. See, the thing was that in the aftermath of this,
hmm,
I didn't want to go and join another band. Somebody obviously listening to this would say, well, all right, so that went pear-shaped. That fucked up. Why don't you just go and join some other band in the Bay Area? And that would have been an answer. But you see, you forget that I didn't have a bass rig, a proper professional bass rig, because, like I said, everything had burned down so quickly that I had no aid or no money to go and invest in a proper bass and a proper rig because of this, of the antics
right.
of the rest of the band. You see, they left us me high and dry, and I'm not just going to go. I don't have $5,000 in those days to be going and spending on a rig that I don't even know what style of music we're going to play. I didn't have the money to invest in that.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, and then when you get that bass guitar, don't you have to practice? If you want to join a band in the local area, hey, what happens
Right.
if they're doing all sorts of blues covers or rock covers or metal covers? What happens if they're doing independent stuff, their own stuff? You have to be up to speed.
Right. You got to be able to get your foot in the door, even in the door. And that's not even really where you're going. You just got to get there, you know, and you got to know what you're doing, unless you're
Yeah.
just like a Mozart of sorts, you know, like no matter what you do in life, you've got to start somewhere. And here we are, you know.
And
So,
then I said,
go
I
ahead.
work almost 7 days a week at a bloody retail job. There's no time. I barely have time to even learn the acoustic guitar, let alone professionally sit, you know. And also, I found out to my horror that the houses in which we lived, in these apartments, the walls were paper thin. There's no way that living in a little apartment I can go boom, 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 boom all night long
And
practicing. The neighbors go fucking ape shit.
yeah, it's an ant bed there, so you can't get away from hearing people messing. That's
Yeah,
why I
yeah.
don't like cities.
Your neighbors upstairs or below you or to the side of you, whatever, right? So I'm like, even when I'm tinkling on the guitar, really, really quiet. I used 8 gauge string guitar strings. People will go, 8 string gauge? Are you kidding? They're like silk and steel, they were called. They're
Hmm.
like almost very, very the lightest strings you can get, and still people will be banging on the walls and go, "Wait, dude, shut the fuck up, man."
Right, because they don't understand, they don't care. I
Well,
remember
well,
being
of
a
course.
young
So how can you
art.
have an electric bass? You know what I mean? Oh, the luxury of going and getting a practice hall and all. No, see, none of that was, none of that was ever going to happen. And
No,
so I struggled along and struggled along. And then to answer your original question, I had to forego doing music in a band format, and just out of pure accident, these other esoteric hobbies would eventually see me, a bit better. Right by about 98, I start doing public things and even a little bit of television and all of that. So that was something that was not willed, and it was not by choice, and it happened more of having to turn my life inside out in hobbies, things
so
that
do you
were
think your
deeply
Siddhartha?
private. Things that were deeply private became more public. That's the story really of the 90s for me.
Well, so that's your Siddhartha road, right? Your
You
walk through
bet.
the shadow, your dark night of the soul.
You bet. You bet. Yeah.
Well, I've
Of course,
got okay.
I'm abbreviating it. Obviously, it was a lot. A lot of
Oh
things
yeah.
went on. That's
Any,
the general.
anyone who understands who you are and has watched you for a while, they know that there's way more to the story. But we're going to go into a little deeper, different questions than what you normally get asked. So
Mm-hmm.
like from your architects of control, with Pluto being in Capricorn back 2008 to the transition that we've gone through here today, and this fulcrum point in time that we are, where this is huge transition in society, and we can be on the verge of collapse with Pluto in Aquarius. What are your thoughts from that point to now, and what phase are we going next?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, see, the first thing that I bring out in my work, in my commentary on these things, is the deep relationship that always existed between Scorpio, the sign of
Mm-hmm.
Scorpio, and Aquarius. And how this works uh, would only be aware, if you were aware of of exaltations. The astrological idea of exaltations. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
granted,
yeah.
some people have a different take on it, but in
Mhm.
general, there's a very, very important detail. Now, to explain to people who don't know what exaltations are, obviously you know that if you have a sun sign, then you have a planetary ruler. There's always a planet assigned to each of the signs of the zodiac, and those are
Right,
called the rulers. Like the sun is the ruler of Leo, and Mars
right.
is the ruler of Aries, right?
Yes.
America is born under Cancer, so its ruler is the moon.
And
But what
Sagittarius
people
here, Jupiter.
Yes, but what people don't realize is that there's another planet that's assigned to all the houses, and that is called the exalted planet.
Yes,
You know this, right?
yes, yes, yes.
And astrologers get to know this. Not all astrologers pay attention to it. I think it's very, very important.
Mhm.
So when we talked about America there being ruled by the moon, yes, that's its rulership. But what planet is exalted, meaning of the highest power in Cancer, turns out to be Jupiter of all
Yes,
planets.
yes,
But
yes.
anyone looking at what America really is can see the Jupiterian aspects way more than you can see the lunar, right? The
Yeah,
lunar
yeah.
the lunar is definitely there with mom and apple pie and the female symbolism, the Statue of Liberty, and a lot of other things. Of course, it's there. It's the ruler. But the Jupiterian idea of excess and plenty and optimism and largesse and expansion, right? That is clearly there as well. So these
Mhm.
exaltations, if you go through the signs of the zodiac and find out which planets are exalted in each chart, in
Right,
each sign,
right,
you
right,
can
right.
get a lot of wisdom from that. All right, so we come to Scorpio. The planet the ruler of Scorpio is Pluto, which you mentioned, and that's its ruler. Fine. Most astrologers accept that. Not all, but most astrologers accept that. So what
Right.
planet is exalted in Scorpio turns out to be the ruler of Aquarius, Uranus.
Uranus.
Right?
That's a big one for a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand that planet. Can you
Got
explain?
it. Yeah, look at this, right? So right away we find out what this really means in non-technical language, right? In ordinary layman's parlance, is
Mhm.
that the Aquarian traits and Scorpionic traits are very closely linked. Is what just this mere thing of exaltations mean. They're kind of twins.
Mhm.
Scorpio and Aquarius in my system of astrology, must be thought of as almost, twins.
Well, I can
There's,
see it as far as in, okay, so like Aquarius is air and Scorpio is water, but they're a distant kind of water, a distant, you know what I mean? Like a,
yeah, don't let that fool you though.
no,
They're,
no, no,
yeah.
not saying that's to fool me, but I could see where, and in an essence, with Aquarius versus Scorpio people, they're kind of both real deep in a sense. And
Sure, but not even so
but
much on the personal charts, right? Think more esoterically, right?
uh,
Yes, if we have to then, when we look at the stereotypical level, it's a little bit different thing. I'm talking here on the more esoteric, implicate level. There's a deep symbiotic connection between these two signs, and
right,
there's other examples of this, by the way, but this one is particularly important because of the age that we're in, like you're talking about. There's this rule that I'm talking about when it comes to exaltations affects other signs as well. But this one is particularly important because of the age that we are in. And actually, this has been really seen in the American milieu since the 60s. Everything that happened in the 60s with the freedom movement and the hippies and the anti-establishment sort of feeling, that went along, most
yeah,
of it was rubbish. Most of it was just designer, fashionable, crap of the,
kind of
generated
like,
by media, but actually within it was some very, very, very holy stuff, some good stuff within that. I think you'd agree, right?
right, oh, for sure, for sure. There's so much, just it's so subconscious, not so much out there. It's more of the subconscious that I think we're talking about in that movement.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
good, you know.
yeah. So these exaltations help us pinpoint something remarkable because it's the reverse as well. I just said that Uranian energy, the ruler of Uranus, Aquarius, what am I talking about? The ruler of Aquarius, Uranus, the planet Uranus, is exalted. That means of its highest power in Scorpio. So this alone one needs to really meditate on because we know that Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. People who are Aquarians know that this is their ruling planet. But do they know that their planet is even of greater power in the sign of Scorpio? No, most people don't know that. Most Aquarians don't even know that. But astrology is teaching us something remarkable here. And then where do we find ourselves? Since last year, right, it's been the reverse. The planet Pluto, which rules Pluto and is exalted in my system, is exalted in Gemini, is moving through the sign of Aquarius. We've already established that there's this very, very close connection between Aquarius and Scorpio. And now we find the counterpoint, right? The ruler of Scorpio is moving through the sign of Aquarius. So
Yes.
this is a dynamic that is very, very special. And but even then, if you come down from that and just look at it in a more mundane point of view, yes, it is terrific because this is the great, I call it nature's hygienist, Pluto. It's one of the outer planets, obviously. And when it comes into the public sign, there's many things we can say about it, right? But one of them is this idea of masks coming down. Like Carl Jung talked about the persona.
I
Uh,
the card earlier before I talked to you, and it was Aquarius. I know.
what's that? The card?
It's a tarot card. It's an oracle card. It's Black Moon
Yeah.
astrology, and it's I pulled Aquarius. I know. So it just
Oh,
goes.
and you just, oh, well, there you go. Look at that.
Yeah,
See,
yeah, yeah.
intuitive. Yeah.
Continue with your thought.
No, this is it. That the Aquarian, it means that Pluto is coming home, its second home. There's a relationship. So just like if Uranus turned out to be moving through the sign of Scorpio, it would be at home because it would be in its highest power. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If Jupiter ever went through a Cancer, it would be in a very friendly place, and many Cancerian traits would come out.
Mm-hmm.
Now we find Pluto is moving through Aquarius, so it's at home. It's at its greater home. It's like you have two homes, one you like down by the beach and the other one you love up in the mountains.
Right, right, right.
And you can't discover which one you like the best, but you feel at home in both places. Well, this Plutonic energy is actually doing quite well. It wasn't doing as great in Capricorn.
Not at all.
No, it was antithetical, even though some things did happen in terms of, explosion of corruption. Because the other thing that Pluto represents is not only the tearing off of masks in something like a psychological sense, where false people start getting exposed, but now that it's moving into Aquarius, where it feels more at home, it's even more. So, for instance, to give a concrete example, what Mr. Trump is doing right now with his team is exactly what I was predicting and I was hoping would happen, when Pluto moved into Aquarius fully,
Right.
which is
And
explosion.
I knew that. And that's why when I emailed you about this, I was like, I want to know, because I remember a video you were talking about, I think it was from 2008. You were talking about Pluto in Capricorn and like Hillary Clinton and like, like the election then. And so that's why I really wanted to ask you that question. So like, because I knew that you've been paying attention to all of it. So that's.
Yeah. Yeah. And I support what he was doing. So I was just wondering, now this is not to say that there's not some really dark stuff. Wherever Pluto goes, it because it unearths.
It's the toilet bowl.
Yes. This hygienic aspect is to get the pus out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the pus comes out. Oh,
Right.
it has, it's not what people think. It's not Americans in the West is generally, just, transitions happen quickly and we move into a new phase and everything's sunny and bright. This has nothing to do with Plutonic energy. Plutonic energy goes slow. It's in its overalls. It's a very dirty and muddy experience of pulling up the weeds.
Yes.
And I would say that the American psyche is not used to it. That's to put it mildly. And the reason why, you see, of course, is that this Plutonic energy also rules psychology. And from following my work that I have labeled America as the most anti-psychological country on planet Earth. And don't be fooled.
But I believe you.
Yeah. Don't be fooled by Dr. Phil, right? That's good,
No.
but it's tame, right? America is actually an anti-psychological country, and I've gone to great lengths to prove this, in my works.
We're so extroverted. We are. We really are.
Right. So now that Pluto, the planet of psychology, has come into the public sign, this is going to change. And the quicker individuals get with the gig, the better. So this is where I think that my work also comes into play, because it so stresses psychology, and I've written about it so much in layman's terms that it's kind of exciting for me, because it brings a lot more people to my work, and it brings my own, like you said, the rite of passage, the whole journey.
And it's been a journey for you. It's been a long journey. How long have you been doing this?
Since 1982, I would say.
Right. Way more than a lot of people have even thought about doing this. I've only been into this, like my spiritual awakening, I guess, slowly throughout my life, but bam, in 2014, and you helped with my spiritual journey, your psychic vampirism series. Oh my God. Without that, I'd seriously probably still be in Australia in like a freaking refugee camp or something. But yeah.
You're talking about Pluto?
Well, it could have been Pluto.
The psychic vampirism. Oh my God, that's probably one of the most Plutonic things I've created, is the psychic vampirism thesis.
Well, my Pluto's second house, so and then I have Uranus in the third house with Scorpio, or in Scorpio. So like it's all, my whole life's been a big shadow work, Siddhartha road process, and since 2019, I moved back to Arkansas and then like just became a hermit in the country. And then I think I've grown just since then. And your work has definitely helped me in my spiritual journey. And
Cheryl,
so let's
what
get back.
What sign are you?
Well, sorry?
What sign are you?
I have 4 planets in Sagittarius in the 4th house. I have Uranus in the 3rd house, Scorpio. I'm a Virgo ascendant and a Taurus moon on the 9th house with yeah.
But you're Sagittarius sun sign.
Yes. Lots of Sagittarius. I'm really extroverted. I've got a lot of masculine energy, and that's something I'm going to ask you back after we get done with a couple of these questions about the feminine and the masculine and the anima and the animus. But that's a question I have for later on.
Well, one thing I can say, just to finish off this thing about exaltations, is
Uh-huh.
that the sign of Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, as we know, but
Yes,
the planet of exaltation is Neptune,
yes, yes, it is.
right? And in my system, it's the same. I didn't change that either. So this means now that there's a connection, as we just talked earlier, between Sagittarius and bloody Pisces.
Yes, yes, yes,
This is
yes,
what this means, because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces.
yes, yes, yes,
Now,
yes.
that's why you will meet a lot of Sagittarians who have, like you have, this spiritual aspect and the love for solitude and the love for the mysteries is because of this exaltations again. So if your viewers haven't heard of these exaltations, they should actually start studying it and show some interest in it, because it's such a fantastic. My whole system was, started off in the very early days by looking at the table of exaltations in astrology and
Mm.
not liking it and making my own fixes.
Right, right.
I could tell you a whole story of how I got into astrology. It was actually through these things. Because just to finish the point, if a planet, it has a ruler and then this exaltation, everything in astrology is polarity. So then must it not have opposites to those two? We've got these two. We've got the ruler and we've got the exaltation. So in your case, it would be the ruler is Jupiter of your sign and the exalted planet is Neptune. But that means that the opposite sign, uh, the that means that Neptune, if it's ever found in Gemini, is at a weakest point in the zodiac. See the polarities, right?
Yes,
If I'm
yes, yes.
strong in this house, then I must be weak. If I'm Neptune and I'm very, very strong in Sagittarius,
Well, I
right?
want to clarify something for the audience because there are a lot of people who don't really understand astrology, and that's another reason why I started this. Is because it's not that I want to do astrology, but I want everybody else to understand astrology because we are at that with Aquarius where astrology is going to help us through the psychology, right? And as an archetypal system, okay?
Right.
And
Agreed.
there's different styles of astrology, and a lot of people don't realize that. There, like you talk about your system. What is your system called?
I just call it the Taroscopes system.
Okay. So you have your system. There's evolutionary astrology. There's mundane astrology. There's Hellenistic astrology. You're talking about the dualism and the polarity. Well, evolutionary astrology does that. That you say, well, like you're having problems in this house, and then you look out to the one by right across from that, and that's where you work to get this one working. You know what I mean? When you work with your birth chart in that statement. So just that I was just wanting to clarify that as far as in different types of astrology, people might not understand that.
That's right. They don't understand this, that when you have a rulership, think of the opposite.
Hmm.
So the opposite is what's known as detriment,
Yes, yes.
right? So say Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. That's in its rulership. What's opposite Scorpio is Taurus. So that means if the planet Pluto goes into Taurus or is found in Taurus in your chart, it's not in a very strong position. It's in a weak position, and they call it the detriment.
Right, right.
Now we do exactly the same thing when we come to the exaltation. If I say that Pluto, no, let's go back to our original example. If I say that Uranus is exalted in Scorpio, right,
Hmm.
then it is very, very weak in the opposite sign of Taurus. And that's called the fall. So the
Mm.
fall position is the absolute weakest position for a planet, and the exaltation is the absolute strongest. So what this means is that if you just got into astrology, then you know about these rulerships. Oh, well, Venus rules Taurus and Venus rules Libra, and
Right.
Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury also rules Virgo. You got that done. Perfect. Now you need to expand it to these exaltations to give you extra insight. So let's take America's chart. America is Cancer. That means it's ruled by the moon,
Hmm.
but its exalted planet is Jupiter.
Hmm.
But what is opposite to Cancer is Capricorn.
Oh, Capricorn's a big
Right?
one.
So the moon is in fall. Sorry, the moon is in detriment because, as I remember, said the rule of opposites means that what's opposite can't be strong. So that's right. The ruler of Cancer, the moon, is weak, and we call it in detriment if it should be moving through Capricorn. But the
Hmm.
exalted planet is also in detriment. Sorry, in fall, like super weak. in the opposite planet of Capricorn. So Capricorn and Jupiter don't get along on this esoteric level that I'm talking about, right? It would just be something that you would notice. Now, every planet has an effect, of course. It's not to say that there's no effect. Oh, no, there's an effect, all right. But it's usually what's considered a bad placement. So I hope people understand that. So now what this can do is, let's go back to our the fact that Pluto is going through Aquarius. What's opposite to Aquarius is Leo. Pluto would be very weak. In fact, it would be super weak in Leo, right? It would be in its fall position.
Right.
So this tells us a lot about the nature of Pluto. It's the furthest away from the sun. And as a matter of fact, astronomically, it is the furthest away from the sun. Oh, what a coincidence, right? And so in terms of what we know about Leo and light and extroversion and kind of optimism, you can tell that this Pluto's not into it. It's the dark, wraith-like, hooded, yes, and water, and hidden one that is, they used to call it, Pluto is an old god, remember, of the underworld. So astrology, psychology, and mythology are all in alignment with these exaltations. This Pluto is the god of the underworld, which had many names. In every culture, even the Celtic world, you had this kind of figure, this god. And it's against the sun. It's away from the sun. The sun is the upper world. He's the ego self. He's vanity. He's extroversion. He's light. And so the Plutonic is the absolute antithesis to that. So again, there's even mythology to be gleaned. When you find out these placements, you go, oh my God, that's like, I've read that before, or I get this. It's in the old Greek mythos, or it's in the Irish mythos, or it's in the Nordic mythos. So yeah, you're quite right to say that astrology and psychology definitely are twin. They go together. And I would even add there's mythological significance as well to a lot of this.
Okay, so going on that, could you demystify astrology in an archetypal language?
Yeah, because what it is archetypal language. That's what we're talking about right now. Rather than just do simple charts and readings for people and all, that's like one of its lowest permutations.
Right.
Astrology and its highest permutation, of the Magi, it's something completely different. It needs to be taken to another octave. And mythology, definitely. Wow, you got Isis. Remember, Isis, the goddess Isis, is connected with the moon, but she's also connected with Venus. Right. All the different gods, like Thor or Odin or King Arthur, can be aligned with. Merlin is definitely Mercury, no question about that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you have to be a complete idiot not to see that, right?
Right.
So yeah, you say figures, characters in Professor Tolkien's Lord of the Rings can all be broken down into the astrological archetypes, absolutely, including Gandalf, and what have you.
Okay. On a different note, what are the connections to Orpheus, Dionysus, and Jesus? And do you think the Orphic Gnostics play a role in the sex rites, the mystery sex rites we see today with like the mystery cults that we see prominent throughout the world and in the missing kids?
To a degree, yes, because the Orphics were this weird cult that had their own weird Dionysian beliefs. Sex rites were very, very important to them. The role of the woman as what's known as archimandrite, like a kind of a magus figure, was very important to them.
More on that too, because I've never heard that before. So
yeah, the Orphics were, and so what happened later? See, Christianity, of course, being so syncretic, was borrowing traits and borrowing motifs from groups like these Orphics. That's why they're important. And just like in anything, there's a spectrum. Some of them were not bad people, right? Some of them were, genuine seekers after knowledge. But when it comes to groups like the Orphics and the Dionysians, they are talking about, they're really a drug cult. Is the best way to look at it. Right. And they're into the sacred mushroom. They're into some weird sex rites. They're into ecstasy. I mean, the principle of ecstasy. in which they believe that very much that enlightenment will only come when there's a kind of a loss of selfhood, and that sex rights.
Sorry. Do you
Oh,
think they're into the resurrection rights, like these mystery rights? Do you think it's like the death to meet God and to not reincarnate?
That would be more the Gnostic idea.
Okay.
That yeah, that the God is, see, but the one thing we have to understand is that in these kinds of cults, the God is usually extremely remote, extremely off limits.
Okay.
But they did believe that if you get a big group of people together and you do certain rites under certain astrological timings, and you take enough fucking drugs, you might manifest one of the lower gods, like a kind of an angelic figure.
Okay.
A guide might manifest amongst you.
Okay.
And if you just get it right. God knows where this came from, right? But these are just part of the old ancient rites. And
actually a group online right now on YouTube who are trying to find the Theriac and start performing these rites as an initiation into their YouTube channel. But they're at the medical side of it, that like it might can cure cancer from the Greek pantheons, So that's why I'm asking you, because I do another podcast and we're diving deep into the Orphic mystery rites and how they treat women and all that kind of stuff. So my next question on this topic, what would you say to anyone that is initiating a Bacchic frenzy, a Medea frenzy in the world today?
Well, my personal, if you ask for my personal belief in this, they're very dangerous. They're very, very dangerous. This is all a recruiting organizations for what I refer to as the female Illuminati. People may know that. I've got a website and I've written extensively on this. Well, obviously, this group that we're talking about is super secret, right? And even top-level Masons don't know about them.
And that's why I want to ask you.
Even though they're controlled by this group, a more common name for this group, a more common name for the female Illuminati that is out there in the tradition is the Order of Sion, S-I-O-N.
Okay.
Not that most people even have seen that term, connected with the Knights Templar and what have you, and even the Da Vinci Code book, but they have no idea. It's still, the penny hasn't dropped, that this is a female order. Now, obviously, when you have orders in the world like these groups, male and female, they have to have recruitment organizations out there to recruit new neophytes. So what passes today for a lot of these bizarro Wicca type Orphic groups is not the original. Well, it might be the original, even back thousands of years ago. We don't know that some of these cults were also, as I'm saying, recruitment devices to lure in certain people who had the right, traits.
Right.
So that they could be then, initiated. And so this is why you find that there's a certain bizarre aspect about these Mithraic, and the term that really covers it is Dionysian. But if you broke it down, you get into Phrygian cults, you get into Eleusinian cults, you get into this Orphic cultism, right? And various Jewish versions of the same thing, right? So all of this I look at as dangerous as hell, and it's a recruitment for much more secretive orders. But they conceal themselves, so they create these other satellite organizations for you to join, to lure you in. You might be poetic. You might just love the fact of camaraderie. You might be into this little bit of a orgiastic kind of thing. We know that in the Romantic period of the 19th century, these Lord Byron types, I'm not saying him himself, but I'm just giving an example. The Lord Byron romantic type, they're fucking joining every kind of revolutionary group, and they're very into the things that I'm talking about. So they want to recruit men and women like that to get them into the organization. But how do you do this? So this is one of the ways. And it might have a Jewish front, or it might have a Christian front, or a Muslim front, or
Pagan.
even an occult front. But we've got to be very, very careful.
Very careful. Okay, so we touched on that part of it. Was I might say this wrong, was the Septuagint written by Jews for Greeks, or was it written by the Greeks?
Well, this is an immense question. This is an immense question. You see, what this would take us into a lot of areas we can't possibly go, right? Because it deals with the true history of Judaism, which is almost unknown to most people, and even most Jews don't know it, their own history.
Right.
But
right.
yes, just to answer your question, Alexandria, which was very friendly to Jews, there was more Jews in Alexandria at the time than there was ever Jews in the world. More than in Palestine, more than in any other country. They all were in Alexandria, but Alexandria is in Egypt. Right? So, and also another place in Egypt called Elephantine. You may have heard of Elephantine. There was a large Jewish wealthy community. And these matter because these people ended up being the repository of some very, very ancient Hermetic works. Because if you're rich, you can buy them, isn't it? We all know about the Medicis collating and buying these manuscripts and these texts. Hey, that's way late in the day. Jewish rich people, Jewish scholars in Alexandria and Elephantine had already absorbed the wisdom, of Egypt and Persia and other places by this coalescing of documentation. This is not well known, but it's a fact, right? And so one of the men you can study that will sort of take you into this is a guy known as Philo of Alexandria.
Okay.
Philo, Philo Judaeus, as he's also known.
Okay.
What an amazing mind, who thought of himself as a kind of a Platonist, but he wanted to update Plato. Now, in his work, he stands out because he's the very first thinker on the planet to say that when you read sacred texts, particularly the Bible, and he's even talking about his own people here. He's talking about the Old Testament and he's talking about the New Testament. You must read it allegorically. So he's a heretic.
Oh, gosh.
This man is fascinating, like Philo of Alexandria. And he's the first one to drop the bombshell that you don't read the fucking Bible literally. Okay, we take that for granted now because we're so long, we're so far. A lot of people have said this. No, he was the first. You can imagine the bombshell, the truth bomb that was. What? Lazarus didn't really rise from the dead? Yes, that's right. It's a metaphor, and all of the rest of it. So it kind of answers your question. These Jews who were split then into those that listened to Philo and men like him. Iamblichus would be another one. Later on, you have a guy called Dionysius, the Areopagite. These are great men who said, always read these scriptures esoterically. You earlier mentioned Rosicrucians and things like that, right? So they would be that group. Then you had the other group that said, no, the Torah and the Bible and the New Testament, it's all literal. So then you get the literalists writing the Septuagint.
Okay.
In an attempt to fight the other side, who want to look at everything allegorically. So you get these two schools, and you still have it today. Those who have the brains to realize that Jesus walking on the water didn't actually fucking happen, right? It's a metaphor. And the resurrection and the crucifixion. No, it's all of these things are deeply metaphorical.
Right.
And those who just say, no, I make it easy for myself. It all happened. If Jonah was in the belly of a whale for 3 days, God could create the whale and God could create Jonah, and damn well, Jonah could spend 3 days in the belly of a whale. The allegorical people go, no. We know something else about it. Right, well, there you are. We're still there today.
And that's another subject that you've done extensive work on, which would be symbolism. And that's one of my favorites of your subjects is the symbolism, and that's where I think I'm pretty good at that when it comes to symbolism. I could spot things where, how it all correlates with each other.
Right.
And another, we're going to Hermetics versus Gnostics. In your opinion, which came first? Are they kind of the same thing? There's big questions on all this topic right here. Do you see Hermetics as a more of a Jewish background versus the Gnostics as a Christian background, or do you see that all together?
Well, they're all separate schools, really.
Mm-hmm.
And Christianity and Judaism borrowed from these earlier traditions. So this is why you get Gnostic elements in Judaism and in Christianity and Hermetic, right? Because they're two older schools. And the later schools borrowed. I'm using that. You could even use the word stole, right? But I'm being softer on them and saying they just borrowed. And they borrowed from others as well. My God, there's so much. This Constantine and his team were running through and chopping up the thing because there was so much that had been stolen from the ancient world that Constantine, he was a maniac, of course, but what he had done, him and his people were trying to make sense because there was so much of this eclectic stuff. So over the years, you had the Council of this, Council of Nicaea, and Council of this, and Council of that, because they were all trying to go through this massive corpus and shape it. You had the Apocrypha, don't forget, you know about that, right? The Book of Enoch and all of this, the Book of Jasher. Yeah. There was so many of these traditions that were being borrowed from. A lot of early Persian stuff as well. The very nativity story is purely Persian, it has to do with Mithra. Christians go out of their minds trying to deny this, but it's useless. It can be proven by any non-biased observer that the story of Jesus born in the manger and born on Christmas Day and all the rest of it is purely borrowed, I'll say again, from the earlier traditions of the Persian Mithra. But getting back to your point, there is a difference between Hermeticism and Gnosticism, and they should never really have been connected. But this happened because when the Medicis were spending oodles of money, sending out the messages to their agents, bring us all of these texts, please. It was like a free-for-all. It was like an amazing way for all these scoundrels in the East to make money. When the word went out, we'll buy anything, right? We'll purchase texts because we got a team, a big scriptorium here of brainy people who are going to go through it and translate it. Oh my God, the charlatans and the carpetbaggers, all lined up, right? And in the middle of this mess, the Hermetic text, is known as the Corpus Hermeticum, the first book in it is not a Hermetic text, it's a Gnostic text, and should never have been there. It's called the Poimandres, which means shepherd of God. It should never have been there. Right?
I was wondering, I just read that, and I was just wondering, because it really doesn't fit with Hermetic, I guess.
It doesn't fit. You're completely right. So this was a mess, and the Medici should have known better, but they didn't. This one, we are still, having to deal with this. It's terrible. And so this caused a lot of confusion because this stupid book should never have been placed. I mean, it's placed number 1. So of course it has an influence, doesn't it? If you're reading, this is the first chapter, then it must, this is the great introduction. Nonsense. The Poimandres was a separate work that got stupidly put onto these Hermetic texts. And so from that time onwards, unfortunately, Gnosticism and Hermeticism have been sort of, overlapped. And I'm a person who tries to warn people about that and notice that there's differences, between the two traditions, so that when you see a Leonardo da Vinci later on, or a Pico della Mirandola later on, or a Giordano Bruno, you've got to be able to tell, are they really Gnostics, or are they Hermeticists, or are they confused? So, we have a lot on our plate when we look at people to discover the Gnostic elements or the Hermetic elements, or a total mix-up. It's quite brutal. It's really not that easy to tell.
Well, I think it's, for me, if someone says they believe they live in a prison planet, I automatically know they're not Hermetic.
You got it. Nailed it. Nailed it. Yeah, perfectly right. The moment that you start here, and if they're very serious, I mean, okay, if you talk about it like Alex Jones with his prison planet, that's
Okay.
nothing to do with any, you don't take that seriously. It's just a euphemism, just a term.
Just something
But
to
if
say.
they've got a little school, if they've got a doctrine that does what you say, absolutely, you know, uh-oh, they've been influenced more by the Gnostics. Now, earlier when we spoke about these kind of sinister cults,
Hmm.
you see, in my work, I step out on a limb and I believe that the Gnostic cult is one of these sinister cults. So I believe that they're the funders of the New Age movement. There's a couple of sinister groups that funded what we know as the New Age movement, and one of them is the Gnostic cult. So I've
Yeah,
talked about that in my work as well.
that's a great point. I'm glad you said that, because that's where me and Cult Examiner, we're doing the other podcast. We think that it has something to do with it as well. The agenda behind all of this, these movements that, everybody wants to know about all these cults and these sex rites and these mystery rites, and they all want to be initiated, and they just jump headfirst into things, not knowing where they are. And I've also noticed here lately, we have a big spiritual war going on with, Saturn leaving Pisces, right? Where everybody's kind of turning back to Christianity. Like 5 years ago, they were calling themselves pagan, and now they've turned back to Christianity. And, and it's just a huge push on Christianity right now. And like, I wanted to get some pagans in the ring, because like some real, pagan might not be the best word for it, but someone who understands all of this and not just like, glazed over it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it'll be a hard task though.
Oh yeah, very much so. But okay, so what is your take on the simulation theory versus the monad?
Well, I'm not a believer in any simulation theories. That's the best way to put it. I know that some people, it's an intriguing line of thought. It's important
Mhm.
because we do need, it's a Gnostic concept. Remember I
Right.
talked about this Gnostic cult. Well, the Gnostic cult is still alive and well today, and it funds, right? It funds certain thinkers that are out there on YouTube and out there in the world. And it knows that it has to break down some of its original ideas to make them simple for this new techie type thinking, right? That came out of the Silicon Valley. That's all the rage in the world. And so I am extremely uh, on guard against the simulation theory because I can smell the Gnosticism in it, and it's a scent I know very well, and it's a very, very dangerous cult behind it. So that would be my answer there.
Right. Well, do you think that the Gnostics have actually taken away the divine Sophia?
Well, the divine Sophia concept, I think, comes from an earlier tradition of the Persians,
Hmm.
and the Gnostics borrowed it, is what I think. So
Okay.
it's not even originally a Gnostic concept. They borrowed that as again, every group that you can think of borrowed from a previous pagan group.
Right.
And it just gets unbelievable as a study when you get into it. So the idea of Sophia, which can also just be personified not only as a woman, but just as a knowledge, just as wisdom. You don't have to put, yeah, it's not feminine, it's not masculine, it's just this idea of the love of wisdom.
Right.
But it is one of these things that was appropriated. And of course, it turns up in the Bible as Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of Jesus, right? So you get this female idea moving through even, the Gospels and what have you, right? And the women that took Jesus down from the cross and ministered to his body and all of this. What is this female element? So it's not just linked only to Gnostics, although they did use it.
Mhm.
So yeah, one can get into that. In the tarot card, if you look at number 8, the Strength card, the
Mhm.
one with the lady and the lion,
Mhm.
that is about Sophic mysteries. That card is a little accent that goes back to this. The lady with the lion.
Right. What do you think about Greeks stealing information and knowledge from Egypt?
Oh, that happened massively. Now the expert on that is a guy called Gerald Massey. So
Mhm.
when I talk about the hard period in the 90s for me, when I had to put music aside and I was delving deeper, probably one of the greatest scholars I was reading at the time, and I read his entire corpus many times, was this guy called Gerald Massey. He's the expert on that, and it's in his works and others that you find out the debt that the Greeks had to Egypt. So it's a fascinating area. They really did. But the trouble was that Massey claims that the Greeks butchered a lot of the original gnosis coming out of Egypt. They didn't know what to do with it. There's some good stuff, he said, but as time went by, it got more and more disfigured because they just didn't know what they had. It's like, again, these Medicis, when I said they botched, right? They mixed the Gnostic with the Hermetic too much.
Right.
It was a natural mistake to make. Well, so did the Greeks, according to Massey. Now, not everybody agrees with this, but I tend to agree with him that the Greeks and the Romans messed up a lot of the pantheon, messed up a lot of the mythology, because they didn't know what they had. And not everybody was an expert at decoding, So later on, you have scholars more of the modern age who went back over this tradition. One of them is a great guy called Swala de Lubitsch, who went over he went over the Egyptian stuff, Gerald Massey as well, to try and go back to its purity, uncontaminated, by the Greeks and the Romans. So there's a whole study in that, and there's some really great experts in that help you go back to untangle it and to make it more clear what the Egyptians were talking about. And there's another guy called Mustafa Gadala he wrote a book called Historical Deception. So, I can list off a lot of names of people who bypassed the Roman and the Greek, trying to go back to Egypt to show you what the Egyptians really spoke about, so that it's not contaminated by these later races.
Sorry, I think an airplane's going over and my dog's about to growl at it.
Oh.
Oh, she's such a guard dog, man.
That's good.
Okay, so speaking on hermetics and the alchemical wedding, and the philosopher's stone, do you think the transgender movement is working through their shadow work and their anima and animus?
No.
No.
Nonsense. No.
Go ahead.
It's nonsense. It's another one of these creations of the Gnostic cult.
Okay.
And the Orphics, and some of these bizarro Jewish groups that came out of Judea after the Romans. Well, actually, they were there even before the Romans got there, but they mobilized to go underground when the Romans came in and smashed Judea in AD 70. A very sinister group who were very, very deeply into drugs. And they had been the plague of the Jewish world. The Jewish world knows all about these characters. In the Bible, they're known as the Zealots and the Sicarii, but there are only two groups amongst many who were like Life of Brian lunatics, right? Monty Python's Life of Brian lunatics. And they brought the wrath of Rome down on Judaism. Our whole world's history would be different if they had not existed. They brought down the wrath of Rome on Jews, good Jews, right? People who meant no harm and were just minding their own business. But these guys would have been at the time like our Antifa today, like our sort of BLM lunatics today. We had them back in Judea. You had them all over the world, but in Judea they were particularly bad, and they were drug lords. And when Rome crushed Judea, they were pushed underground. Now these creepos that you can call Dionysians, along with the Gnostic, overlords, and other sinister groups as well, is it sort of how would you call it? It's like a combine, a secret combine.
Yeah.
And my mentors have all talked about it in different ways. Everybody's got their own spin on this. But this big combine went underground, and they resurface in many interesting ways. One of them is Hollywood today. They're behind it. They're behind the New Age movement, as I've already said. They're behind these lunatics like Abramovich, and they're also behind this tranny movement.
Do you think with Pluto being into Aquarius and the exaltation of Uranus, is that's going to change as far as in the transgender movement? Will it morph into something good or bad?
Well, remember, we've also got to worry then about Uranus and Gemini when you talk about this.
Yes, which it'll be soon.
Right. Even worse, right? So the Uranus in Gemini is not a good sign for sanity in our
Right.
world.
I've been thinking about that one because
Yeah.
we're about
And by the way, even Neptune moving into Aries is not a good sign. I'm very, very personally worried. I see some very good things happening with the Pluto in Aquarius, but the trouble is there's other transits that are in my, and I remember this is just personal.
right.
I am not happy with what I see. I wish I was more confident. I like some of the Plutonic stuff because that means, as we said, the masks coming down, people being more critical. Wherever Pluto goes, it's psychology, it's a raise in your critical abilities, all that's great. And it means that on one level, we'll be less tolerant of bullshit. So when you see this political movements and when you see all of this wokeism, the Pluto brings in a feeling of like, I am done with this. Now, if you study what's happening in England, with the immigration, and if you study what's happening in America, people are in fact getting critical and getting sick, and they're going back to the old New York way that was famous, in the years gone by, where you just looked at people in the eye, and in the southern states the same, and you said what you fucking felt.
Right.
I wish that would come back. That's the America that we grew up in Ireland and England looking at on the TV films, and we loved it. The Humphrey Bogart era, all of that, right? We loved that. Then we come to America and find everybody's fucking offended by everything anybody says. What happened? So the Plutonic energy is very positive in that sense. And I hope that that continues, and I hope that that prevails. Now, there's some signs that it will. But unfortunately, there's also these countermanding forces. The Uranus in Gemini is not a positive thing, in my opinion. It's good for technology and some innovation,
About that.
but it's not good in other respects when it comes to personality disorders and manic craziness and sexual debauchery and all of that. And what did we others say? The Neptune in Aries, I think, is a very severe warning. In fact, I even fear for the life of Mr. Trump. I think his enemies are after him. I think he's in extreme danger. I think
he might have another assassination attempt, I think in April, somewhere around there. So
yeah, I hope you're wrong, but I myself fear very much for him. I think that I really have tremendous fears. I think the Secret Service need to be on guard. I even see his life is. See, remember, don't forget that when he got into power, Cheryl, he got into power under Jupiter retrograde.
He did. He did.
Right. Now, on my podcast and to personal friends, I said that that's a good sign in one way, because Jupiter is the ruler of kings.
Yep.
And when it went retrograde, it's coming back to help a kingly figure. So I immediately knew from that Mr. Trump can become president because of the Jupiter retrograde. I was like, yes, right? Fantastic. Jupiter retrograde is coming back to say, okay, there's some work undone in the past. Let's fix that. And I knew it will support a kingly figure, which Mr. Trump definitely is. I've always liked him from the first moment I laid eyes on him, right? Now, but there's a dark side of that as well. In my system of astrology, I don't look too much to the future as much as I look to what happened when a thing started. So we're back to this Jupiter retrograde. The Trump presidency began with Jupiter retrograde. I just mentioned the positive aspect, where it's the ruler of kings, and it can come back to sort of help a kingly figure of status. It can facilitate his desires, which it did. But the other thing that's wrong with that is that it can also, it's not a particularly good sign, because it can indicate that enemies, secret enemies, fiercely want to pull you down, and that your rise to power is meteoric. Now, we saw it was meteoric because he went through his first term, right? That ended in a bad way. That was meteoric.
Yes.
So this meteoric thing is around Mr. Trump, and I just hope that it's not going to be the second meteoric thing where he either dies of a heart attack or something, or there's even something more sinister happening to him, in the coming months. And there's even, I don't want to talk about it even anymore, but the Mars, sorry, the Neptune in Aries worries me enormously, and especially in terms of the Trump presidency. If I was his advisor, I'd be fucking warning him, to be very, very careful.
Well, hopefully he's got a good astrologer. So
I don't know. I hope he does. I really do. You never know.
so
But that's my theory on it.
about anything that's important to you that you want to talk about.
Well, no, that this is we just did. I didn't know that we're going to get an opportunity to talk about this because this has been a private worry of mine. If I was more active on social media, I probably would be blabbing this out. But I just have this very, very sinister feeling that the whole experiment that Mr. Trump is trying to do could be meteoric. It could come and it could go. What I really mean is that his enemies are not going away. These enemies are seething with hatred of what he's doing and who he is. Right. And they're irrational. They're not good people.
And he's in power now, so they're going to be trying harder.
That's it. So the man who gets to this position, he's got enemies everywhere. And so that's why I would say that extra caution is required. It will not come from his insiders. I think they're mostly a good group that he's got around. No, it'll come from these Maxine Waters. It'll come from the outside. It'll come from these Obamas and people like that. It's his enemies, right? The left. So whenever he goes out to meet at a gathering, when he goes to these groups, and these conferences, this is when he'd have to be very worried of another assassination attempt. And of course, astrology could help. Yeah, it definitely, I agree with you there. It could very much help him. Yeah, if he's got a good advisor. Yeah.
Right. On these social movements, the war of the sexes, the not just the transgender movement or anything like that, but just the way we view the world when it comes to men and women. What is the best advice that you could give women, any woman that wants to try to get into like research and get into this knowledge, move away from these agendas and try to grow spiritually? What's the best advice you could give a woman? And the next question will be for the men.
I think they've got to be very aware of the media. The media's legacy at misleading women about femininity is legion, right? Legion. And when older women, mothers, are exposing their daughters to these filthy magazines for women and these websites, the media, this is where I think things have to change. I think these TikToks and OnlyFans are diabolical.
Right.
They're run by the communists.
Society makes it so hard for all of us, so it's an easy out kind of thing, and that's why I want to know what your thoughts on, like, where should we start as women, not just with the TikTok and the femininity, like working with our animus, getting to know our animus and our masculine side, so where we could actually be more feminine and understand why we lash out the way we do, why, and also our hormones, our left right brain thinking, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but see, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the women are too far gone, personally. It'll only take a massive apocalypse.
Well, I think maybe a few of us, I'm not saying that all of us are, too far gone, but maybe the women that have followed you, because you have been a big inspiration for me. And I remember, you saying something years and years ago that the only way that it could really change if the women were to get involved in all this in the proper ways, not just, I hate men, blah, 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 kind of, oh, you damaged us for whatever, but actually start seeing us as a balance, not with just in the world, but within ourselves,
Oh, I agree. Yeah, agreed. Of course, that needs to happen. Certain special women who get it and who've got good female models, not the feminists. They need to be looking to other people in the past. That can definitely be a big help. Getting into psychology, getting into my work, it would be a big help. And then you could make a slow change. But it means that they would have to get. I've written 2 books, and you're quite right. Dragon Mother and Adultism, these 2 books, are mostly for women.
Oh, I know that. Like, you, in a sense, it's like, you talk about the female Illuminati and that part of the really dark, negative side of femininity and womanhood, right? But in order, really, I heard you say something on some girls' show. I don't remember who it was or how long ago it was, but you said that sometimes you've got to be the dragon mother, and in the sense of where you have to protect.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Oh yeah, there's definitely a means of this where you have to go cold turkey from all the programming,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and this darker side of the feminine needs to be understood. It's unleashed by these Gnostic forces. They've mobilized it, they've funded it, they bankroll it, and women have just been following it stupidly. But you're right, there's a certain group of women. I definitely do back that up. What you said, I totally support. I said it earlier that my work is for the women to make the change. It's not for men to make the change. Women need to step up. And that will be a very difficult sort of curve, you know, for them. It's like a learning curve. But what will happen is that they need to be tired of the bullshit. The sisterhood knows how to work on the lower energies of womankind. And that's what's been happening. This evil sisterhood at the top has been putting out agents time and time, all these feminists. They put out the feminists, right? It started as a nothing lunatic movement back in the 19th century. And it's been funded and funded and funded, you know, second wave, third wave, fourth wave, all this. It's occult. It starts with an occult agenda. Women bought into it en masse. Some women have woken up and don't want nothing to do with it. And I hope that that trend, you know, continues. It's not something that can change overnight. That's the first thing.
Right. It's going to take
it's a slow waking up from a trance. The promise of female empowerment, all this nonsense, you know. So that's an education. You know, I publish on Substack. We're going to be doing another podcast later in a few weeks on this subject. Deceived by Feminism, I think is going to be the title. So yeah, it's a slow coming awareness that the idea of femininity has been weaponized against women. I call it that women have been used as doomsday weapons to bring down Western civilization. You know, from this sort of KGB Central, if you will, the Communist International, who have some very, very clever people from the Frankfurt School and what have you, who have got into our psychology, and they have accentuated this sexual conflict, you know, between the man and the woman, right?
It's
But
everywhere.
it's all done. See, it's not done to empower women. It's not done for equality. It's to do with female supremacy.
You can see that real heavily in these feminist movements. I've never really considered myself a feminist. I like to be feminine, and I like to be empowered. But to be a feminist, that means I have to view the world in a certain lens, and I've never been good at that. I'm more of a like take it as it comes kind of person, you know. And so like the feminist movement, I could see where women have a big a suppression within them, a subconscious about how they've been held down because they couldn't work or had to be in the kitchen or whatever. But what truly means to be feminine, not the feminist movement, but to be feminine is just to be receptive and to and to understand who I am as a person, as a woman, but also who I am in this alchemical process that I've been going through to balance my masculine and feminine, to where I could be actually who I am as a person and not be worried about, my emotions or you know what I mean,
Sure do. Yeah, but they don't want that. This cabal definitely doesn't want that. See, the women that they employ hate women. What normal women have to understand is that they are not being helped by this feminist movement. They're being sacrificed.
Yes. And it gets also into, okay, so like the dating scene that a lot of people have to go through nowadays, like the feminist movement has made it to where they're not, I mean, they try to make it like sexual empowerment, but really it's just they've made it to where just a hookup culture for a low-hanging fruit for men. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty sad. Yeah, these are all the compensatory ways that give you maybe a fleeting feeling of superiority.
Yes,
And you'll go along with it, but it's not based on love. It's not based on empathy. It's based on it's gynocracy. And gynocracy goes a long way back. Now, I posted on my Substack a few weeks ago this thing called matriarchy, the matriarchy fraud exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been working on that for many, many years. There's even a book there's females who've written on this, the myth of the matriarchal age, because this even crept into historians and anthropology, in which lies were told about, Amazons and these goddess cults of the past. It's all been refuted, and you can read about it. But I
Okay.
posted a good video that people can watch on my Substack on this. It was just a few weeks ago I put up there. And so slowly, this plutonic energy that we've been discussing is working to drop the masks, to expose the corruption and the falsity. And it's also done it in this regard. So women need to be realizing that they've been defrauded, and lies have been told about ancient history and about their role, in tribes of the past. All of this needs to be revised. And some of these lies that have been broadcast down through the years, and even has crept into science, into like I say, anthropology, and into history, they're not to be believed anymore. New evidence has come out showing that this was again highly funded by a very secretive group to work on women's psyches. And in my work, I do a lot on this. I've got a series on Unslaved, called The Monstrous Feminine.
Yes.
And many other programs along this to show what's been going on in terms of this exaltation of the feminine and how corrupt it is.
Okay, so what are your takes for men and how they should go about, in society with these feminists, with everything that's changing the way it is?
Well, this is my critique of groups like MIGTOW and everything. Even though I understand it and the manosphere, and I
Right.
do like a lot of what they're doing, some a bit more than others, merely throwing dirt at women is only a beginning. I mean, MGTOW right now is stuck. I don't know where it's going to go because they are not interested in the psychology of women. It's just about naming them as bitches,
Right.
pointing out the dark side, and you can get caught in that,
You
right?
can't. You can. Yes.
You can easily get caught in that. Most, younger men will get caught in that and come up with all sorts of preposterous, like these incels and all. It can really go bad. So what you need to replace it is psychological insight into what woman is, what man is. Both sides need this. Remember we talked earlier when we started about this deficit in psychological insight? Now we're unpacking it. Now we're seeing that both for men and women, this lack of psychological insight and this concern and care about the subject of psychology, this is where one of the deficits has come. This breakdown on a sexual level. And this recriminant, see, when you don't have the psychology, then you just get into he said, she said, and you get into this mudslinging, and you get into this shrinking back into your own group.
And where everybody's scared of everybody.
Yeah, of course, because you lack the psychology. You're not empowering. The real empowerment comes from psychology. Now, it does turn out that women are the least interested in their own psychology of the two sexes. Psychology was formed by men, mostly, to a large extent. And since the advent of psychoanalysis, it's been women who really not bothered at all picking up psychology. There are some exceptions. They're very few. And I'm not including the women who'll say, well, I even work in psychology, Michael. What are you talking about? Look at my white coat. No. That's psychology in general. I'm talking about female psychology. There are no women interested in that subject, really. It has to be. So what men have done is at least they brought the subject, the Irish Naumans, the people that I write about. Yes, we brought it back to the table, but it is for women to do the work. I mean, we can't, there's only so much you can do, right? The woman has to show an interest, but that will mean at the same time blocking out the crap that comes out of the media, the crap of feminism, the crap that your mothers have taught you, and all the rest of it, and starting with a blank slate. So it means a lot of going cold turkey, of being able to what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It's like a kind of therapy in which you realize that the toxins have come in, and you've got to go through this long period, fallow period, where you say, "I don't know." See, what's happened is that the heads are so full of opinions and knowledge that there's no room for any new light.
Right,
So
right.
there has to be a period, and I hope this Platonic energy will help with this, where there's got to be a deconstruction, a realization that you've been poisoned slowly over centuries, and you need to disgorge that. You need to detox, and then sincerely and lovingly, look at the alternatives. Right now, there's so much hot air, there's so many bushfires, there's so much going on that it's quite difficult for people to do that. But people can read my work. They can go to, I've got websites on femalepsychology.org, right? They can go to my main website. You'll see links. If you go to michaeltsarion.com, you'll see links from that website to a lot of other writings on this subject. So if it's new, and I've got a site called dragonmother.org,
Yeah.
which links up to some really, really good articles on this if it's new to people. And they're written both for men and for women.
So my next question is all about you. What, I mean, I guess if you wanted to, if you don't, that's okay too. But what are your beliefs? What are your spiritual beliefs?
Yeah, I'm what's known as, I call myself a mystical naturalist.
Hmm.
You know, so it means that I'm more of a spiritual person. I'm not really that religious. And I just have a very open mind to be studying all these different subjects without so much of and I'm also a personalist. A personalist is somebody who uh, develops their own outlook on life and basically keeps it private. So I've written a book on that called Disciples of the Mysterium, the philosophy of personalism. That one of the problems of our world is that there is too many voices. There's too much confession. There's too much interaction when it comes to the deepest matters of our own being. And so there's a certain privacy, certain introspectiveness that's required, and contemplativeness, that when we come up with ideas on reality, we don't automatically go out and blog it to everybody else in the whole wide world. We sit with it for a long time and
Right.
we let it percolate. So that's what I would say, is that it's all right to have opinions. It's all right, like we're doing, to talk mercurially about different ideas. But when it comes to your deeper self, and there is a deeper private self, to keep it private. That's what personalism means. But mystical naturalist is a kind of a hermeticist. That the God spirit is all around you in nature, and we are custodians of that order. You talked about Druidry earlier on.
Yeah.
So coming out of that tradition, of the Irish tradition, I think this is where I would be at. This idea that there may be supernatural realms or whatever, but really we're here in this realm. That's where we've been placed. And so the natural world, the earth, is our home. I think we're caretakers of it. And this is what our chief focus should have always been. And both men and women are made to do that work. Both have a role. And those roles have become completely destroyed with our technical, the rise of technology and modernity. We've lost a lot of this. And because we've lost it, we're in the fallout. Look at the state of our children. Look at all the rest of it, all the horrors. So, yeah, I'd be like a pagan. I would say, close to paganism. Actually, you could say, with a few nuances here and there. But I'm definitely not a Gnostic. Definitely not into religion. I think these are all very, very evil things.
And how's your music evolved throughout these years?
Yeah, in one way, not at all, because the loves that I had in the past remain exactly the same. I've not changed. Those heroic, bands, and when I get into the music of the time, at the time, back in the 70s and 80s. They're still my favorites today. I
And
do
what
keep up. I do keep up with, new music, of course. You're right, in rock and metal, new bands coming out. I love that. But yeah, so there hasn't been a lot of evolution. There's been evolution on the technical side. There's been evolution in terms of, the way in recording, say for instance, right, to keep up with the technologies and to keep up with the software, when you're recording music and all of that. I think that's all wonderful. It makes it easier for individuals who are on a budget, instead of buying giant stacks and, like I said before, rigs. You
right?
don't really have to do that anymore. I love the fact that it's compact, it's on the computer, the software that helps you explore. So I love that part of the modernity of it. But no, I'm an old school guy all the way down the line. I think in terms of music, the stuff I loved back then, the Pink Floyds, the Moody Blues, and all these other bands. I just get deeper and deeper, more appreciation into it as time goes by, not less.
Are you playing music anywhere now?
Not publicly. I've released my CDs.
Mhm.
It's Michael Tsarion music.com, msarmusic.com. So I put those up, and that was a great achievement for me. It's just acoustic music, acoustic guitar. So I did a lot of open mics for years and years, but now because of the scene, there's hardly any open mics anymore, and people aren't even interested in acoustic music anymore, really. So yeah, I'm not wasting my time with that. But I practice all the time and listen to music constantly. Yeah, privately.
If you have a chance, would you get into a band?
Not at this point. It's too
Okay.
much hassle. Too much hassle. I think the time for me to do that was in the past, and because it blew up, that's the life telling me that I had to go on a different path, and you just have to face that.
Right,
What I
right.
would like maybe to do is to take my own, see, the music that I recorded on the CDs, hundreds and hundreds of tracks, is only a small part of my output. I have more sort of, that stuff is all finger style.
Mhm.
I have other music that's more pop, more riff orientated, more kind of popular, you would say. And I've got hundreds and hundreds of tracks. So at some point, not maybe form a band, but bring in, my idea was to bring in other instrumentalists like violin players, and flutists, and sort of compose
Mhm.
some more music along those lines, and then publish it online, something along those lines. So it wouldn't be completely a stop. I think there's a lot of potential there, I was planning on doing that, but then along came COVID, and all the lockdowns and people getting very, very isolated and all. It just again, every time I thought about doing this, some block came up,
Like
so
in
I
that.
had to respond to that, yeah, and move on to something else.
Are you writing any books or will you be writing any more books?
Oh yeah, I've got two new ones on the way, and uh, I just published the first two chapters of it as we speak on Substack. I'm making these a Substack book. They're not going to be in any other form, at least not now. They're only being exclusively, published right now on Substack as books. So there's two more, making I think 14 books in all, uh, and I'm very excited about those. Going through those now and putting them up on Substack. That's why I joined Substack, is ultimately to do that. There are some other articles there not connected to the book. Well, they're all connected, but they're sort of miscellaneous on other subjects. But as of this week, and
Well,
just
that's
today, you and I are talking today, I published the second essay or second article from this book. It's called Existentialism. It's on philosophy. So that's very, very exciting. Did that just before I came online with you.
Are you and David, are you guys are still doing your Unslaved podcast?
That's right.
If
Yeah.
you want to plug that and let everyone know what you guys are doing and what's coming up.
Yeah, we've been doing that since 2016. It's been going very strong, and we just got banned from YouTube. I was one of the first people to be shadow banned, you see, and deplatformed on YouTube, one of the very first in this movement. And I had also a lot of Facebook problems, stuff being censored and taken down. And so after the many attempts, when the final YouTube channel was of Unslaved was banned, we just then put our own private podcast together. We knew we wouldn't be censored, and we could speak our minds, and also have a longer format type thing. If you remember, in some earlier days, you didn't even have the time on YouTube. The files length. It was only a little bit later that you could have 3-hour length, 4-hour videos. That wasn't originally the case. You could only put up maybe half an hour of content. We didn't like that. So by forming our own website and our own podcast, which a lot of people have done now, but back then, it was a great relief to be able to do that, where we were totally under control and not censored. So we're still doing that. Unslaved.com is the place to go. People can sign up.
Do you
We do
think
a podcast every week.
Yes. Do you think that YouTube or all the censorship is going to ease up, or do you think with the transits it's going to get worse?
It might be a lot of talk. As I said, these people are such wimps, so horrible, that because they can see what Mr. Trump is doing, they cozy up to him. I don't like it. I don't even know why he's allowing them to do it. He must have his own agenda. These Zuckerbergs and these people, to me, in Google, are foulest creatures walking the planet. And when I see them, cosseting up to the president, I would not do that. But he has his own reasons for probably doing this. He thinks he can turn them around or something, or he can twist their arms into being better. But it's far too early for me to tell whether they really mean what they say.
Right.
About easing up on the censorship. I hope they will. The signs are that they will, but I would give it 18 months. Because remember, Mr. Trump can say what he wants, but when it comes to real time, how do you know that you won't be censored still or demonetized even by YouTube? What I want to see is when people start putting up a lot of heavy duty content again, that it stays there. Then I'll be convinced. I need to be convinced by actually seeing strong content like it used to be.
Right.
I want to see, and I want to see this with PayPal. I want to see it with Google. I want to see it with Facebook. I really want to see it to believe it. That you can truly now speak your mind, say what you want, as long as it's not vulgar, and below the belt. But
they let people speak vulgar all day long and then censor certain people because they're talking about different subjects.
Yes.
I've seen all kinds of stuff on YouTube now that I'm like, how are they getting away with this?
That's right. So you're right. Yeah. But when conspiratorial type alternative stuff goes up, I want to see it. And then I want to know, because you see, what needs to happen is that actual rules, if you're censored and you get a lawyer to fight YouTube based on the new principles and these executive orders, your lawyer will come back. If Mr. Trump didn't exist, he'd say, no, I'm not going to work with you to take YouTube to court. You won't win because of their statutes.
Right.
You've broken their rules.
And they're a company.
And their community guidelines. And so, mate, I'm sorry, but it's a private company, blah, blah, blah. You won't win. And anyway, you'll be spending a lot of money on me. And if I don't come through for you, it's all wasted. And people don't have the money for lawyers to go and take YouTube to court. But now, and again, given a bit of time, now it's different. What Mr. Trump has done is he's giving you a little bit more teeth there, so that your lawyer might go, oh, things have changed recently. Yes, I can write to YouTube and, maybe we'll get a positive result because there's new laws now, right, that do help you with your censorship claim. So that's all very, very good. But it still leaves you, though, to pay for the lawyer.
Right.
So even if you took all the censorship away and then you still find yourself running foul of something, you are still the one who's going to have to fund, the whole process of getting your channel restored. So there's, the best thing to do is wait for a year, 18 months, so that you can see clearly that these people who's putting up this incendiary but necessary content, they are in fact not being censored in any shape or form, and then I would believe it. I'm so pessimistic that, and there's so much evil has happened in the past, particularly to me personally, that it's going to take me a long time to go back. It's like a dog who's been beaten that many times You're not going to just go and lick the hand of these
Right,
groups until you're
right.
absolutely sure. Yeah.
So we've got just about 10 minutes left in the 2-hour time slot. What would you say to anyone that wants to get into this research field about how to stick through it and keep pushing on?
Yeah, well, that's why I've worked so hard to write these books. A great deal of my material is free online in the websites, more than enough. Used to even be more, right? Um, but because of the censorship that I had on YouTube and all, things had to change, and we went to be a bit more monetized and private. But still, there's loads and loads of free material. I've got my Astrotheology Zone website, the Female Illuminati website, the Dragon Mother website. There's many websites on philosophy where there's a lot of free content. So I would direct people there. We've got the podcast. Now I'm even on a Substack, so we've got articles there. I've worked, very diligently and hard to make this information available to laymen, because some of it, you see, is out there already, but it's in very, very highfalutin academic type,
Right.
form, and laymen haven't got the time, or the sort of the focus,
Well,
and
I
that's
like
right.
your work over the years. You've been able to consider your extensive research. You've been able to condense it down to where people can understand it a little bit, more, as far as in the everyday person that has to go to work every day, where they can actually
Right.
just listen to it and do what they need to do. It's just really easy, accessible, and I've been listening to all kinds of information for a long time now, and I really think that it does take time to get it put in your brain, to really understand it. And the more you get into it, the more you do it, it gets a lot easier. And and of course we all have to go through those dark night of the souls, to where we were kicking and screaming sometimes. And I know you've said over the years that sometimes people don't even awaken unless they go through something really tremendous.
Oh
So
yeah, that's a fact. I stand by that to this day. But don't forget also that my work covers a lot of different subjects. That's why there's a lot of different websites. If I had just tunnel visioned on conspiracy or psychology or
right.
or symbolism, right, that would be a whole different thing. My life would have been so much easier. But I've got all of these different interests, and I like to work them all so that they're all at a very high level.
Right, right,
One's
right.
not down here and the other one's up there, focus. I try to even them out. So in my work, it's been like an artisan to try and bring up all of the different subjects to a certain level of sophistication and understanding, to make it easy for readers, also to do it in use the internet and make it there for laymen who don't have the time. This is one of the techniques, or one of the one of the tactics that's used by Big Brother. They know that you have to work. You know that both partners are out there working. They know you don't have the time. You're exhausted. So this is one of the things they're using on us. Now, I believe the interest is there
It
in
is,
people. Oh yeah, but the
especially
fact
now.
is, even though the interest is there, then you go genuinely to start studying, and you get lost in all the miasma and the complication. And then there's other forces that are distracting you on the internet. So I just keep my stuff real low profile. We don't really advertise much, and I compose my websites in a certain way that just they don't have any advertising or bells and whistles on it. It's pretty plain and simple.
Right.
Yeah, and also, as I said, that I do justice to each of the different subjects. This was the big challenge for me, because in the beginning, some good stuff, but it'd be weaker. This other stuff would be stronger. It's like, no, I wanted to make it all more balanced. And it's taken years and years to do that. That each subject that I deal with, let me make it stimulating and of interest on a more even keel. That one is not more, expressed than the other. So I feel that now when I look at everything, that's what's happened. About 2020, I started really moving in on some websites that hadn't been finished. The Irish Origins of Civilization website had been sitting there with lots of pages that had not been finished, for a long time. Same with astrotheology. And I just tunnel visioned and brought them all up to date, you know, and that was like such a relief. And then we redid the mystery school, changed that, updated a lot, you know. So all of these renovations. Then I created the music site, you know, and what have you, and some brand new sites. They're all available by going to michaeltsarion.com. And again, as I said, they were all brought up to speed. You know, almost needing no additions right now. There'll always be some stuff to add, but I wanted to bring them up where it's like, oh my God, that's completed. It's all there for the viewer. You know, I'm not leaving anything undone. Now, of course, websites that have videos on them, well, YouTube are canceling so many millions of videos a year that sometimes you'll go to a website, oh, here we go again, missing video, missing video. So you need to do updates and try to find replacements. You know, that can be a bit of a task, but we stay on top of that as much as possible. But in general, apart from the videos that might go missing, yeah, the content in other ways, it's complete. So I feel a sense of completion when it comes to the websites.
Awesome. Well, I think we should end on that note. I think we have like 5 minutes left, but I could ask you questions all day long, but I do want to say I appreciate your work, the extensive time and effort that you've put into everything that you have done, the spiritual aspect that you've brought to the table in this arena, this huge arena that we have. And is there anything that you would like to say about what you're doing, or anything actually?
No, just a big thank you to you. I really appreciate what you're trying to do, and I think it's all about people like yourself creating channels like you're doing with Deep Water.
Yes.
Not just stopping at one point, but continuing. And I'm really, really appreciative that you contacted me so early in your journey here, you know, to be one of the first on your podcast. I really appreciate that. These were also very great questions. They covered a lot of ground, and I like that. As opposed to just,
I thought about it. You know, I've known your work. I've listened to like all kinds of stuff that you do, all these interviews. So it's like I could just do it off the cuff, like I would do with normal people that I know, that I've have an interaction with, like personally and stuff. But it wouldn't. Yeah, I would be scatterbrained because I could ask you a million questions. So I had to write them down last night. So.
That's okay. That's the way. You know, I mean, I actually prefer that format than just dealing with one subject.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
again, I thank you very much. We're going to end it here. And if you would like to come back later on when I get going, I would more than love to have you. And I'm sure my audience that I'm going to have would love to have you as well.
You bet. You bet, love. Okay.
You have a great day, great night.
Yeah, you too. Cheers.
Thank you.